Jurassic World Dominion. So this is the 6th and apparently final instalment in the Jurassic Park saga. And the series began all the way back in 1993 with the first film, which still remains an absolute classic. And people still love it now, and a memorable masterpiece of cinema. And it's had 5 sequels since then. And here we've finally got the finale. But I think my personal approach regarding this so-called finale, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it concludes any kind of character arc or relationship, or just the general feeling of, oh, this is building up to this moment and we're just going to, you know, have the absolute best of everything, and it will, you know, ultimately resolve all things within the franchise. And I think a large portion of why the first film was such a success has been a vital problem in some ways with why the sequels haven't been, because The Lost World was decent but it wasn't brilliant. Jurassic Park 3 was a complete and utter disaster. Jurassic World was rebooted in 2015, which I thought was decent, it was okay, but it was for a new audience, so I gave it the benefit of the doubt. And Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was a disappointment as well. So the Jurassic Park series in general has been a bit of a hit and miss series for me. I was hoping that Jurassic Park Dominion would at least kind of round off this new trilogy, and that it would hopefully be something that people will remember. So the film is set 4 years after Fallen Kingdom, and dinosaurs and humans now coexist in the world. This comes under threat though when a scientific project comes into play and shapes who the more dominant predators are on Earth. So if you rewind the clock back to the original film, you would know that the concept of Jurassic Park is to create something fun and entertaining for the cinema audience, but also because the target demographic were younger people, that it would be educational, because of course dinosaurs are a piece of our history and they were here before we were. So I think it was important to get that message across and to create a story that helps the audience understand the world that we live in and who came before us, but at the same time to create something fun and entertaining for cinema purposes. And that's why I just don't think this series has been the same since the original film. It's not character driven, it's just about bringing humans and dinosaurs together, and then they all come together, and then fights happen, people die, science comes into play, etc. There's no characters for us to follow, and that's where it failed in that respect. I personally think the Jurassic Park series could have done exactly what the recent Planet of the Apes films did, because that original film was released in 1968. It's a classic. It had a bunch of mediocre sequels. It was rebooted in recent years, and we're following an ape. We're following his story, where he is the main character, and that's exactly what we should have had with this. I'm not saying that we need to have a dinosaur who's talking and a dinosaur who is going to be doing all these things like people would do, because obviously it's an ape, what I'm comparing with a dinosaur. But what I'm trying to say is that we need a character to follow in terms of the dinosaur and also the human and coming together. Although one thing, to be fair, I will say, we did get a character in the trilogy, including in this one, and that was obviously Blue, because we followed her, how determined she was, and then she has children, etc. So there was a kind of maternal factor about her, but it just wasn't capitalised enough where she was the main character, and she could have been. And that's what again was disappointing about this, because this was just another generic adventure story. It didn't stand out any differently than anything else we've seen already, because it just didn't feel like the conclusion that it probably should have been. It left an emptiness for me because the story was just so weak, it was really bland. I didn't feel engaged by any of it. In fact, there were some kids sitting next to me who were actually yawning. Genuinely, I'm not even gonna lie, they actually were yawning because they were that bored, and that was only within about half an hour because of just how boring and how wooden the story was. There were a lot of cuts to landmark shots of certain places, and they had the title at the bottom with where it is, but I still feel like it just kind of falls into place coincidentally rather than just it being part of the narrative. Because when you look at things like Indiana Jones and James Bond, they go to loads of places across the world, part of the story, but here we just did not get that. And in terms of the performances, again, a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say. I do like Chris Pratt as an actor because I love him in the Guardians of the Galaxy films and Avengers, of course, and I do like his character of Owen in this series. There's just not too much to him in this one, because in the first one, yes, he was someone who was almost like an Indiana Jones kind of figure who understood the dinosaurs and worked with them, etc. And that's who we got in the first Jurassic World, and in the sequel we got someone who was a little bit of a mixed bag again, and again he was being the action hero. But for me, there was just no personality. It just didn't connect with any of the other characters in the film. And the same goes with Bryce Dallas Howard as well. As much as I like her as a performer, again, like Chris Pratt, I did like her in Jurassic World, not so much in Fallen Kingdom, and again here, there's just no chemistry between her and Chris Pratt. That's just my opinion. And of course we did see the return of Laura Dern, Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Alan Grant, Dr. Ellie Sattler and Dr. Ian Malcolm. And when it comes to nostalgia, bringing old characters back, a lot of people are like, oh my god, you know, wow, amazing, those kind of reactions. But here it was just like, oh god. They just kind of were in the film for the sake of being in the film because it's the so-called conclusion. And I just don't know, besides the nostalgia, what difference they made to the story. Personally, I like all three actors and they were all brilliant in previous installments in the series, but I just don't know what any of them really added to this film at all. And I think another character issue of the Jurassic Park franchise have been the villains, because pretty much all of them have been rubbish, to be perfectly honest. They've been absolutely diabolical, and this one is no exception. And we had Campbell Scott in the role of Dr. Lewis Dodgson, who, to be perfectly honest, is probably the most cardboard villain I've probably seen in a film for a very long time, whose motives and actual personality still remain a mystery. To be honest, I think there was more personality in the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Giganotosaurus, and even Blue. And when you think about a villain in a film of this magnitude, you'd think that they would be developed enough and they would be considered a threat and dangerous to the protagonists, like we've had over the years in Star Wars, in Marvel, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, etc. But in this one, he was just introduced and didn't offer anything really at all. And if this is the conclusion that we've got, it's massively, massively underwhelming. It really is, and it's something that this franchise just does not deserve at all. So overall, Jurassic Park Dominion has been a complete flop, if you ask my honest opinion. And there hasn't really been a single outstanding film in the Jurassic Park franchise since the original film. And maybe sometimes some films just aren't meant to be franchises at all, or it's just been misdirected and misinterpreted over the years, where there's been no kind of real concept of story, real character development, or any kind of leadership in terms of where it's been going. And that's where I think it's been underwhelming and disappointing, that it just hasn't reached up to that potential of what it could have had. And I know that Jurassic Park Dominion has been taglined as the epic conclusion of the Jurassic era, but for me it just didn't conclude anything. The only thing in fact I think it did conclude is that they should just put this franchise to bed now. So what did you think? Were you surprised by it? Did you actually enjoy it unlike me, or did you just find it a flop and disappointment as I did? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did want to enjoy this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell tick so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care everybody.